It's about the life and times of Mary Tudor, and it's an illustrated guide to places of interest. Now this book accompanies a bigger book, a big hardback book that I have on Mary Tudor, and it's vintage, so it was produced by the Book Club Associates series of Kings and Queens of England in the 1970s, I think. Let's have a look inside. So on the right hand side we have a map. It says the life and times of Mary Tudor, places of interest. So up here we have Scotland. Now I have a little pointer so I can point places out to you. So here is Glasgow, Edinburgh, there's Inverness, and then we're down to England. This is Newcastle, and Sheffield, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, Oxford, Nottingham. This is Wales, this is Anglesey, and then London, Cambridge, Norwich, Southampton, Bristol, Exeter, and then around here all the different places of interest with a line pointing to where they actually are on the map. So let me see. So this is the introduction. Although Mary Tudor reigned only a brief 5 years, her life spanned over 40 and witnessed the development of a new style of house which emphasised not the needs of defence, as in the Middle Ages, but comfort and appearance. The great palaces in which the Tudor monarchs lived have already been fully covered in this series, so this booklet concentrates more on the modest buildings of 16th century England, family homes like Little Morton Hall, civic buildings like the Guildhall in Lavenham, and the minor fortification of Lindisfarne Castle on Holy Island. The places particularly associated with Mary and with her rival, Lady Jane Grey, are also described. Sadly, few traces of Mary's occupancy survive in any of her houses. Some have disappeared in the ravages of time, and some through indifference, for few sought to preserve the unhappy memories associated with Mary I. So the picture on the front, by the way, is the entrance of Hengrave Hall in Suffolk, and the back picture, which we saw briefly, is the fan vaulting in Lane's Aisle, the parish church of Colompton in Devon. So it starts with Bury Pomeroy Castle in Devon. I'm actually going to use my stick. One of the most romantic of Tudor ruins is the great mansion built by the Seymour family within the walls of the medieval Bury Pomeroy Castle. The house was built in the reign of Edward VI by the son of the Lord Protector Somerset. The Seymours are estimated to have spent £20,000 on the building, but it was never completed, although the family lived there for many years. The house and castle are now beautiful is too warm and serene a building to deserve the title of castle. Even in its medieval days, it was protected only by a moat, and after the great reconstruction in the 1550s, it became a comfortable Tudor mansion. The rebuilding was begun by Richard Fiennes in 1554. He remodelled the principal rooms, raised the roof to accommodate 2 floors above the great hall, and built Corpus Christi declined, and by 1547 the hall was used for secular purposes only. 8 years later, Dr. Rowland Taylor, rector of Hadley, was imprisoned there before being burned at the stake on Oldham Common, where his grave can still be seen. The Guildhall is now under the care of the National Trust. It stands on the south side of the marketplace in Lavenham, 7 miles northeast of Sudbury, at the junction of the A1070 and the A1071. So this is Hayes Barton, the birthplace of Sir Walter Raleigh. It's in Salterton in Devon. The year before Mary came to the throne, Walter Raleigh was born in the modest Devon farmhouse of Hayes Barton. He spent much of his boyhood here, and doubtless ran down through Hayes Wood to the sea, along the same path which exists today. The reed-thatched, E-shaped house with its gables, mullioned windows and stone chimney is typical of the prosperous rural homes of Tudor England. Much of the interior is original, including the king beam, 8 feet long and a foot square, which supports the whole building, the uneven staircases and the large kitchen with an open hearth and bread oven. The 4-poster bed in the room in which Raleigh was born dates from the same period, as does the oval window panel showing the Raleigh arms. Hayes Barton was only leased to the Raleigh family, and in adult life Sir Walter tried to buy it, pleading with the owner. Being born in this house, I had rather set myself there than anywhere else. His request was refused, perhaps fortunately, as the house has thus escaped the fashionable changes he would probably have made. Hayes Barton lies a mile to the west of East Budleigh, a few miles from Budleigh Salterton on the south coast of Devon. This is Lindisfarne Castle, viewed across the causeway to Holy Island. So let's read about that. In 1550, a border survey reported of Holy Island, there is a harbour sufficient for a great navy of ships to rest safely in, and very aptly for the wars towards Scotland. It was these features of the island, the size of the harbour and the proximity to Scotland, which prompted the building of a castle in the same year. The garrison consisted of a captain, 2 master gunners and 20 soldiers, who were paid 8d a day to guard the lonely coast. The importance of the fort declined when James VI of Scotland succeeded Elizabeth on the English throne. By the beginning of this century, it was in a dilapidated condition, but a visitor to the island, Edward Hudson, founder of country life, saw its possibilities as a romantic house. He purchased the estate from the Crown is off the A12, Chelmsford to Colchester Road, a few miles north of Chelmsford. So here we have Sawston, with a portrait of Mary above the panelling, and this is a tapestry from the bedroom in which Mary is believed to have stayed, showing the building of the temple. Okay, so let's read this. Sawston Hall in Cambridgeshire. As her brother Edward VI lay dying, Mary had set out for Greenwich when a warning came that the King's protector, the Duke of Northumberland, intended Lady Jane Grey to supplant her as Queen. She turned away from London and rode northwards, pursued by 400 troopers under the command of Northumberland's son, Lord Robert Dudley. The first night she'd sheltered with her Catholic supporter, John Huddleston, at Sawston Hall. Barely had she left the next morning when the troopers rode up and attacked the hall. Mary looked back from the Magog Hills and saw the flames of the burning house. "Let it blaze," she said to John Huddleston. "When I am Queen, I will build a better." Her promise was not forgotten. When Mary's reign was established, she knighted Huddleston, made him captain of King Philip's bodyguard, and allowed him to take stone from Cambridge Castle to rebuild his home within the remains of the earliest mansion. But royal favour died with Mary. Under Elizabeth, the Catholic Huddlestons had a difficult time and only completed the new house in 1584. One of its most significant features is the Priesthole, designed by Nicholas Owen, a Jesuit dwarf, who was famed for the cunning of the priestholes he made for Catholic families all over England. The Sawston Hole is the finest of them. It is hollowed out of the solid masonry of the tower, with an air vent leading imperceptibly into the courtyard and a cover that fits perfectly with the floor above. In the great hall hangs a portrait of the grateful Mary Tudor, and upstairs is the tapestry room in which she is believed to have slept. The walls are lined with Flemish tapestries of about 1500, showing scenes from the life of King Solomon. Sawston Hall stands east of the village of the A11, 4 miles south of Cambridge. And here we have Syon House. Syon House, Brentford, Middlesex. The peaceful and prosperous life of the Bridgetine nuns of Syon Abbey was rudely shattered in the reign of Henry VIII. The abbey first fell under a cloud when Sir Thomas More conversed there with Elizabeth Barton, the Holy Maid of Kent, who had enraged Henry by her reported visions, which led her to denounce his divorce from Catherine of Aragon. Elizabeth Barton was executed at Tyburn, and a Crown agent was sent to report on the nuns. The agent dutifully detected the incontinence of the nuns of Syon with the friars, among other misdemeanours, and the monastery was suppressed in 1534. One of Syon's priests, Father Richard Reynolds, refused to admit the kings. Supremacy over the church, and was hung, drawn and quartered at Tyburn. Syon became crown property and the temporary prison of Queen Catherine Howard in the months before her execution in 1542. 5 years later, the funeral got presented the Lady Abbess with a silver model of Sion House. She remarked that she still had the keys of the house, but the Duke replied, "Indeed, madam, I have altered the locks since then." In the 19th century, the community returned to England and are now settled at Sion Abbey in Devon. In Elizabeth's reign, Sion House became the property of the Percy family, who have owned it ever since. The interior of the house was remodelled in the 18th century by Robert Adam, and Capability Brown redesigned the garden. A century later, the north side of the quadrangle was rebuilt and the walls refaced in Bath stone. The existing house therefore presents vivid contrasts: a battlemented exterior on the plan of Protector Somerset,